Hello and welcome to the Social Blog. I'm Oded Grober, and this week we'll be discussing the charity business. In the past decade, despite or maybe because of the economic downturn, non-profit organizations around the world have grown significantly, sometimes taking over the traditional roles of government. It is also an industry, one that moves trillions of dollars. We'll be discussing the pros and cons of this phenomena and ask if good intentions necessarily pave the road to hell. So without further ado, let's head to the studio and meet today's guests. Joining me in the studio today are Yael Patir, director of J Street Israel, who previously worked at the Paris Center for Peace. Hello, Yael. Thanks for coming in. And Keren, Kirsh, editor here at I-24 News, and also with some experience as with NGOs as in research development, if I'm not mistaken. Resource development,
yes,
I should say.
Fundraising, no.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're all talking about the same thing at the end of the day. It's all about getting some money. But yeah, let's hear from you a little bit about your experience in NGOs. What do you do? Why do you choose to work for NGOs?
So basically, my professional experience since I've become of age to have professional experience has been in the world of nonprofit organizations. Why is because I've always wanted and was interested in promoting social change, and I found that nonprofit organization is the most appropriate way for me to bring that about. And my professional experience is focused on the area of peace building and political advocacy.
Yeah, I think that may explain why you chose to do it with NGOs and not with traditional government method, but we'll get to that later. Keren, a little bit about your experience?
Well, I've worked in resource development or fundraising, and resource development is like a wishy-washy way of saying fundraising. It's where a lot of English-speaking people find themselves, working in Israel, and I worked for two different kinds that maybe we'll get into. One is like sort of welfare, helping children kind of an organization. The other is an advocacy lobby kind of organization, and then they're both very different in terms of getting the money.
Before we take a look at our reports today, I want to share some statistics with you because it turns out that perhaps nowhere in the world is the nonprofit sector more significant than right here in Israel. According to the Johns Hopkins UN Nonprofit Report, the nonprofit workforce is on the rise around the world. The current average per country is 7.4% of the total workforce, but here in Israel, we are number one in the world. 12.7% of Israel's workforce is in the nonprofit sector. Also, Israel is second in the world for how much nonprofit contribute to the national GDP. That is very interesting stuff. So, I mean, we always thought that we're startup nation, but apparently we're more than that. We're also a nonprofit nation. Why do you think that is? Yeah.
Go.
I go first? Okay. So there are two reasons that I see as the main ones. One is historic. We're a new country, and we're built by rich people from abroad, and that's where most of the money came into. And sort of the NGOs were the obvious tool. There were others in the beginning. But
from the get-go.
From the get-go, from how we bought land and how we built our first streets. It was built by, money from abroad that's given to the good cause of the Israeli state. And the other is a more local one, or more new one. Privatization processes made the government give away a lot of its jobs, and they're giving it to the NGO sectors because in Israel there is no separation between a philanthropy that helps poor children and a foundation that gives a lot of money to totally different reasons. It's all in the same basket, so it creates a really big basket.
Right. Yeah, what do you think?
I would add to that. I mean, definitely, I think that Israel is unique in many ways. That's another another one of them. And there is the story of how the state was created. That it was created by nonprofit organizations and by a lot of volunteer force. And I think the culture of volunteering is still something that is very strong in Israel in comparison, if we want to think about the positives of having a big nonprofit sector, is that there is a very high percentage of volunteers in Israel, in education, in youth movements, and so on, with feeding the poor. So that's just to highlight an element of that. And the other thing that I would say is that when you look at, it's very important to look at the different organizations.
Right.
We call it the non-profit world or the non-governmental sector, but in fact it's composed of many different organizations. One such pool that is quite big in Israel is the religious organization.
Pool, of course. All right, that leads us to our last statistic before we present our portrait of the day. In Israel, which is only suppressed by Japan, the vast majority of nonprofits provide services like healthcare, housing, and social services. Perhaps that's because Israel's poverty rate has grown more than any other OECD nation. At 20.9%, Israel's poverty rate is higher than Mexico, for instance. Yeah, our reporter Yael went to visit two NGOs in Israel who are committed to fighting poverty. Let's take a look.
Welcome to the Latet NGO's food storage facility.
We serve as an umbrella organization, like the food bank in the US.
קיבלתם נזקקים חדשים? מה את אומרת? אנחנו מכאן.
From here we travel with the Latet food packages to our organization, where we distribute it into boxes, and then everyone gets their food package. There are many that if we don't make it to their house, they won't have anything to eat.
נגיע אליהם, לא יהיה להם מה לאכול.
There are 15,000 active NGOs registered in Israel, but even that number is not enough to fight its poverty rate, which is the highest among OECD countries.
התפקיד של המגזר השלישי המקורי.
Our original goal was to plug the holes, to be a second or third safety net, certainly not the first, which is what is happening now.
באופן קבוע במהלך השנה.
The country and its government is supposed to be doing this, but they don't do anything.
Latet is a highly funded, well-oiled machine. It pays for expensive campaigns, holds 50 paid staff members, relies on 13,000 volunteers, and annually supports hundreds of thousands of people and families who live in poverty. Artist Igel Stein, on the other hand, is a one-man enterprise. 3 years ago, Stein began operating the Levinsky Soup Kitchen from his art studio, a voluntary endeavor serving hundreds of African refugees who crossed the border into Israel.
There was a difficult time in Israel for human rights, and citizens came to help the refugees, not NGOs or governmental agencies. There was something more important here than money.
Shoes for women, kids' clothing, games. We'll bring some more. Most of it are shoes and clothing. Not only I don't get any money, and I don't belong to any organization that can provide me salary, I pretty much spent the money I had.
Over the years, Israel's NGOs and their CEOs' salaries have been under public scrutiny. Latet, which is the largest Israeli NGO dedicated to ending poverty, found itself at the center of attention. This despite its claim that for every dollar contributed, the Israeli society is handed 94 cents.
The highest salary is mine, and it's $6,700 a month. It's published on the internet, but I've chosen this as a career. I could leave if I want and earn 2 or 3 times more in the business sector.
The Jerusalem Foundation came to me with a proposal to raise funds minus the percentage of cost that they'll need to work, but I refused. It doesn't seem right to me that someone would earn money from the process.
An NGO that is based solely on volunteer workers will find it difficult to work methodologically and to safeguard the interests of the public, that their donations arrive at their intended destination.
All right. So I think the obvious question is, are these organizations doing the government's work?
In many cases, yes, I guess. And you know, that's especially Latet. You should be asking the question, why isn't there a government force fighting against food insecurity?
Yeah.
And they're trying to make this decision, but in Israel, for instance, what happens, and that's my main criticism, is that in the end they'll find a solution and then lease it out to an organization like Latet to do it.
All right, let's talk about differences between NGOs. I mean, obviously. Latet, for instance, and J Street have very different ideas of what they're trying to achieve. How does that come into play?
Right. So when you look at different organizations, it's not only what they're trying to achieve; it's also how they're funded, their relationship with the government.
Yeah.
So for example, there's a big sector like Latet of organizations that are funded by the government, or sometimes it's seen as if they're funded by themselves because the government is an income for them. They're like a business, right? They provide social services for the government pays for it, and that's I guess a matter of point of view whether that's the job of the government or not. This government doesn't think that it's its job.
Also there's the matter of compensation for people within the NGOs. I mean, should it bother us that the CEO of an NGO is making a nice paycheck?
I think
you might think that we shouldn't, but
I think it depends what that NGO does. I can say that there's NGOs. Latet is a big organization and gives a lot of services, but there's other like research, think tanks, for example, where the chairman or the CEO is like somebody who was an ex-professor of a university and he has to have a salary that will match the salary he got before.
Right.
Or when you get a general to be the head of the association for retired veterans of the army, again, he will demand the salary that he got before, and that's the only way. That's actually,
the ones with the most that I can criticize the most, because like the generals get a pension. They don't really need this for the money. If they're now in their second career doing social service, do the social service. There's a difference between that and between like a young lawyer or young researcher who chooses the third sector as a profession and chooses to make less money.
I agree with you. I would say that most of the people that are involved in this sector choose to get less money.
Right.
Which also, we can also talk about, so who are the people that go and work in this sector? Because obviously there are people who can afford it.
But you're saying they can already afford it.
That's all the signs show to that. Yeah.
Also, there's the question of output, of results. How do we measure the success of NGOs? Is it just how much money they're able to raise, or because also with such different fields?
That's one of the biggest questions in the world. The world is dealing with it because Israel is like peanuts, It's not like international development in Africa or stuff like that, where the really big money is going and where there are problems that seemingly we should be able to count if more people are getting access to water, or less people are getting sick, or more people are learning how to read. Right. And somehow that also falls through cracks of how to do this. Mechanisms, and is it government or associations or whatever?
All right, we've discussed local philanthropic NGOs, advocacy and political NGOs, but perhaps the most studied and problematic group of NGOs is in international development. Let's take a look now at today's post by Marie Semlin, talk about just that.
$135.8 billion. That's the budget of governmental development aid in 2013, which is a tiny drop in the ocean that is the multi-trillion-dollar charity business. That alone would give $112 a year each for the 1.2 billion of people around the world who live on less than $1.25 a day. And yet, the poor is still poor, the hungry is still hungry, drinkable water is still scarce, and money doesn't seem to be making it any better. Haiti, for example. In 2010, the earthquake killed 220,000 people. Tens of billions of dollars were donated and promised for reconstruction, but 4 years later, the island is still in rubble and the NGOs are leaving. And people wonder, where did all the money go? Some of the promised money never arrived. Most of the reconstruction contracts were signed with foreign companies and not locals. The Haitian government was totally inept, and the countries who promised to send troops paid themselves back for the cost of sending soldiers with the money they supposedly donated. Meanwhile, the American Red Cross CEO Yael McGovern earns $1 million a year with benefits. Sometimes it's not just the money, but also bad ideas. Example, in 2006, an NGO launched the Play Pump, a water pump that pumps clean water through children's play. They raised $16 million to set them up all over Africa. But a few years later, most of the pumps are broken and abandoned, and in certain villages, adults are paying the children to go play. Since then, the Play Pump is no more, and the CEO declared that maybe we were too ambitious. So if you want to save the world, think small. That way, if it's messy, it'll be a small mess.
So without a doubt, these are very interesting issues, but unfortunately we're out of time for today. Thank you so much, Yael. Thank you, Keren, for joining us here. Thank you at home for watching us as well. I hope you enjoyed our show. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Social Blog, so please be sure to join us again. Now I got to show you how